Okay, this video is on the sensors, and again, a quick little one, let's get it out of the way. Not too much detail here you need to know. So the sensors, animals have a range of sensors that help them survive. And you'll probably remember in primary school learning the five senses, sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. So for each of those senses, you can try to think of at least two reasons why they'd be important. So in a test, we might ask you, why are one of these sensors important? Well, sight, for animals, is going to be important for being able to see food, see predators. Hearing, same sort of deal, be able to hear each other, communicate with members of the same species so that we can work together, hear predators approaching, things like that. Taste, very important, so we can distinguish between, taste gives us a good idea of if what we're eating is good for us or whether it, well, often things taste good to us because they've got lots of energy in it and we need energy to run off. Unfortunately, these days we get a bit too much of that. It makes us a bit fat. But taste is very important. If something doesn't taste right, it might be a sign that it's gone bad. So it might have bacteria in it or things like that. Or the taste, it might just be a warning. If something tastes bitter, then it might actually have something in it that's not so good for us. Touch, okay, so being able to touch, really important in animals. Like we evolved from primates. Our touch gives us our sense of grip. We evolved from animals that lived in the trees, so that's going to be really important. Smell, again, it's that to be able to find food or, to assess the quality of food. You guys do that. You'll take something out of the fridge, you'll give it a sniff and go, is this still good? Oh, no, that's not good, so we don't eat that. So again, smell, a really important sense there. So I'm sure you can think of a couple of reasons why each sense is important. Nothing too hard there. So let's get on with it. Alright, receptors. In order to be able to sense these things, we have receptors, and they basically just collect information about our surroundings and relay that information to the brain. And they do that by sending nerve impulses, and we're going to look at what nerves are in a little bit, so don't stress too much if you're not sure what that is. Right, there are different types of receptors. Mechanoreceptors, which sense touch, Photoreceptors, which sense light, Thermoreceptors, which sense temperature, and Chemoreceptors, which sense chemicals. So you just got to look at the start of that word. They always end up receptors. So mechano is touch, mechano, alright, photo is light, think like a photograph, thermo is temperature, and chemo a chemical sensor. So, what is the stimulus word? What does stimulus mean? So stimulus is one thing, and stimuli is several, but a stimulus is anything that we respond to, anything we can sense. So a stimulus is anything that's happening around us we can sense, like a loud noise or a bright light or a funny smell. Those things are all stimuli. So stimulus is one of them, stimuli is several of them, the plural. So stimuli are essentially the things that we can respond to, environmental factors that we can respond to. So an example of a stimulus is a very loud noise, and essentially a message is transmitted through our receptors to the ears, to the brain, where we then decide how we're going to respond, and the response is carried out. So why do we cover our ears in response to a really loud noise? Well, to protect them. So a really loud noise can actually damage our hearing, and a really loud noise, that stimulus causes us to respond by maybe covering our ears. That'll be your instinctive reaction. Alright, so types of receptors, we'll quickly look at those. You don't need to know too much detail about these, but essentially here we go. The first one, Mechanoreceptors, is probably the proper way of saying it, Mechanoreceptors. These respond to actually several different types of stimuli. So they can respond to heat. Alright, so mechanoreceptors are found in our skin, and there's quite a lot of them in our hand. They respond to heat, cold, so temperature, pain, touch, and pressure. So touch is probably pressure, but the touch, it goes a little bit beyond that in terms of we can also sense kind of texture, which is a little bit different just to pressure. We can feel if something is smooth or whether it's bumpy. So essentially here, guys, heat and cold, so temperature, pain, touch, and pressure. So pain, often if we puncture the skin or things like that. So these are our mechanoreceptors. which basically pick up these kind of signals. So they're found in our skin and in our muscles and things like that. In our muscles, they help us feel how far we're stretching, and there's a few in our inner ear as well, which help us balance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we look at the ear. So mechanoreceptors taking in these stimuli, and that's probably what you need to remember. Just that mechanoreceptors can respond to these things here: temperature, pain, touch, and pressure. Alright, thermoreceptors, they basically respond to temperature. And again, think about, if you're thinking about this in a test, or where are the thermoreceptors found? Well, just think about what part of your body can you actually sense whether, what would you use to see whether something is hot and cold? Well, basically you just touch it with your hand. Your skin would give you a fairly good indication of whether it's hot or cold. So yes, our skin contains lots of thermoreceptors. Photoreceptors, well, what do we use to see light? Our eyes. So photoreceptors are found in the eyes in a thin layer called the retina at the back of the eye. It's kind of this layer here on the back end of the eye, on the inside of the eyeball. Photoreceptors pick up light. Alright, chemoreceptors. These respond to chemicals, and these receptors are found in our tongue and in our nose, and they pick up chemicals that are floating in the saliva, and chemicals that are floating through the air in our nose, and essentially different chemicals will activate them in different ways, and these are what enable us to sort of taste and smell. And taste and smell are actually very similar senses. It's the same kind of chemicals that trigger these receptors in our tongue and in our nose. So if food smells bad, it will actually that'll affect the taste. And if food tastes bad, that can affect the smell. They kind of go hand in hand. And that's why the smell of a food is also very important to its taste. It actually affects the taste. And I think they've done experiments with this by adding perfumes or something, maybe not even directly to the food, but so that as you're eating it, it smells different. And the smell actually affects how much we enjoy or how we perceive the taste of the food. And in both cases, it's just small chemicals going through either the air or the watery saliva and attaching or interacting with these receptors that send signals to our brain. And you've probably heard of we can taste these different types of tastes: sweet, sour, bitter, salty. There's another one, I think, umami, which is sort of a meaty, a sort of a savory taste. And a combination of those are what gives us the flavor we taste when we eat food. So in the tongue, you've got these little taste buds. They're just sort of these little recessed buds with these little pockets at the edges. And inside there are these special receptor cells here. There's this taste pore, and small amounts of chemicals from the food come in this tiny little hole, this pore here, and activate the taste bud. Depending on what type of food or what type of flavor it is, you'll get kind of a different sort of activation. And that will send signals to our brain to tell us what it tastes like. So, guys, simple little summary here. Guys, which of the organs are responsible for the following senses? Sight, well, that's our eyes. Smell, so that would be the nose. Hearing, the ear. Taste would be the tongue, but also probably the nose, actually a little bit involved in our taste there too. Touch would be the skin, and balance, actually, again, the air. So the air is involved in balance. So guys, practice question kind of here. We can go through this one quickly. Past question. Complete the following sentence. Cells called receptors detect stimuli, which are changes in the environment. These include receptors in the eyes, which are sensitive to light. Receptors in the ear, which are sensitive to sound. Receptors in the air are also sensitive to change in position, enable us to keep our balance. Receptors in the tongue and nose, which are sensitive to chemicals and enable us to taste and smell. And receptors in the skin that are sensitive to touch. What are the other ones? Pressure, pain, and temperature changes. So there we go. Those are the ones there. Those are probably the only ones you really have any trouble remembering. So maybe learn those ones. Cool, that's it. Let's get on with it.